This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 179, Healthcare Content Marketing Spotlight, the Patient Guide. Hey folks, Rachel here. Yes, this is another unplugged version of the podcast this week. No music, no editing, no post-production, just me. The good news is I do have my Mac back. Yay, got my computer back from Apple after they fixed the hard drive. The thing is, I do need to rebuild my my audio setup in GarageBand because I had to wipe all those files. And while I'm at it, I'm going to be looking at changing some things up with the music and with the transition audio. So next week, I promise we will have a fully produced podcast with new music and maybe some other surprises. So stay tuned for that. Also want to say thank you. I got some very nice comments about last week's Unplugged podcast, including my improvised transition music, including a very nice compliment from my podcast veteran friend Orlando Margal in Puerto Rico. So thank you all for those lovely comments. So yes, this time next week, all will be back to normal with some new elements. That being said, hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you attract and retain business through the power of quality content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is June 15th, 2016. That's for you, Orlando. Hello, hello. As we say in Texas, howdy, and thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. Reminder, this podcast is available on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and now Google Play Music. So if you like what you hear, please feel free to click on over and subscribe so you can get every single episode delivered directly to your happy little ears. I also invite you to subscribe to our weekly tip emails. Every Friday, we send out a quick content marketing tip plus links to my weekly video and the weekly blog post as well as to the podcast. And we would love to have you in that little community. To subscribe, just go to resonancetips.com. Last week, we turned our attention to Social Media Examiner's 2016 State of Social Media Marketing Report, and we shared some key insights for content marketers from that report. So if you happen to miss that episode, feel free to check it out on iTunes or Stitcher or via the RSS feed. Today we're turning back to healthcare, our topic for the month, and we are putting a spotlight on a vital piece of healthcare content, the Patient Guide. But first, it's time to check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. Okay, some changes over at Snapchat to kick off this week's news feed. Snapchat has updated its Discover pages to feature a Pinterest-style row of icons and tiles, and also the Stories page now features a single scrollable row of, as they put it, non-friend content. So this would be content from brands and publishers. As TechCrunch reports, this update, and I'm quoting here, makes professionally made and community-curated content just as attractive as what friends share on the app, and, get this, should make building the channels more lucrative for publishers. Publishers, translation, you and me, amigo, us humble content marketers who are putting our content out there. So, I've said on this podcast many times, now is the time to give Snapchat a look and to start using it. And yes, I'm talking to myself as much as anyone else because I've been remiss in really using Snapchat as a platform. So we will learn and grow together. But anyway, check out those new features on Snapchat. Also, a new feature out of Twitter. Man, Twitter's been moving and shaking lately. They've been kind of dormant for a long time, but lately been getting a lot of lots of new innovative news coming out of Twitter. They are making it easier to embed Twitter timelines into your blog or your website or wherever you like. So rather than needing to create timeline widgets for your accounts, you can now customize an embeddable timeline display using Twitter Publish and just copy and paste that code onto your website. So the way to access this is you go to publish.twitter.com and you can enter the URL of a profile, a collection, a list, And there are like 5 or 6 different options. One thing you can embed is a timeline for a hashtag, which I thought was kind of odd, but I'm sure Twitter has their reasons. Anyway, so you input that URL and Twitter will give you the embed code that you can paste, like I said, into a blog post or on a page on your website or wherever you like. Okay, our content hit of the week is a post called Rich Results, 5 New SEO Strategies Marketers Must Use. This is a guest post by Kristen Hicks on the Content Marketing Institute site. And yes, I can hear foreheads being smacked across the world as I share this news, but Google is at it again, folks. This time with something called Rich Results. Now, what these are is, and it's nothing new, it's results that include different types of information. So sometimes when you look at that search engine results page, you will see some entries will have images, some will have things like reviews, 4 or 5-star reviews, and other types of information. And you might see that in various combinations, various formats, and various screen positions. And the good thing about these results, of course, is that they stand out. So if, for example, I'm looking for a recipe and one shows up with a pretty picture next to it, my eye is going to be drawn to that search results. So the question is, how can we make sure that our content gets on the rich results bandwagon? Well, in this article, Kristen shares 5 strategies to help you do just that. Very interesting post, very well put together, and I will share the link in the blog post for this episode. Okay, that's it for this week's update. If you stumble across something you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, please tweet it to me at Resonance CONT, that's Resonance Content with the ENT lopped off, so that we can share. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment, Healthcare Content Marketing Spotlight, the Patient Guide. Okay, all this month we have been focusing mostly on content marketing for healthcare. Now, if you are not in the healthcare industry, I encourage you to stick around because a lot of the insights that we're going to be sharing are very easy to leverage in other industries and can be just as beneficial in other industries. So whenever I say patient guide, you might think client guide or partner guide with respect to your product or service. Just something to keep in mind. So why the focus on content marketing for healthcare this month? Quite frankly, it's because y'all need help. And the reason I know y'all need help is that you have told me you need help when it comes to your content marketing. So to serve my peeps in the healthcare community, we are devoting an entire month to answering those questions. And today I want to focus on a piece of content that, when done well, can be a real boon to your organization. And that is the patient guide. So as marketers, we need to remember that marketing doesn't stop when we sign the deal, or the healthcare equivalent, when the patient makes his or her first appointment or signs on as a patient, however that looks. We need to make sure that we're making that experience as favorable as possible so that those patients will not only come back, but will also become advocates. And when they see out there requests for, can anybody recommend an OBGYN or a family practice doctor or a hospital to have this procedure done, they will snap to that opportunity to share your name and to share your experience. So I want to go into some steps. I think I've got 6 steps here. I haven't counted recently, for how to create a very good patient guide for your organization. And again, if you're not in healthcare, stick with me. A lot of these strategies can be really useful for many different industries. So step 1 is going to be your research. Before you start writing anything, do some research as to what information needs to go in that patient guide. You can start with some external research. So if there are healthcare organizations you admire out there, whether that's the Mayo Clinic or maybe a smaller organization that's in your hometown and that's local, if they do a great job with their content, hop on over to their websites and see if they have a patient guide or what information they offer to make that patient experience more favorable. Now, of course, we never want to copy anyone, but their resource can be a good source for us of ideas to start with and things to cover as we put our own guides together. And we also need to look at internal research. So talk to people in your organization who have direct contact with patients. You want to talk to your phone operators, your concierge, your interns, your nurses, anyone who works an information desk and in any area of your location, and find out what kind of questions they get. What do patients come up with that they ask about, and what questions can you look at incorporating those answers into your guide? Also brainstorm with your team for content to include in your guide. What might patients need? And this is something you can set aside maybe 2-3 hours for a brainstorming session. If you need the rules of brainstorming, I cover those somewhere in my blog somewhere, but really brainstorm some ideas. For example, I know here in Houston, the Texas Medical Center attracts patients from all over the country and all over the world. So a team might brainstorm, okay, what are those patients who are coming from elsewhere? What do they need? They need airport information. They might need hotel recommendations that are close by, ground transportation, maybe any discounts that are available by virtue of being a patient. Those are some things you might brainstorm. And then finally, talk to patients. You might want to create a little focus group and have a Google Hangout where people share those ideas. Or you might want to create a simple survey where people can share those ideas. And you want a mix of newer patients and longer term patients, and really talk about what they would like to see in a patient guide. And my experience in dealing with consumers, in this case patients, if you just ask them, oh, what should we put in our patient guide, they might be a little reticent as to what they want, what you want from them, and how to frame it. So frame it in some very specific questions and find out what would have been helpful information to have at their fingertips, especially when they first became patients. So that research step is vitally important, because if you jump right into the content creation, then you're going to find things that need to be added in there, and then you need to adjust your timelines and adjust your plans. So we want to do a very thorough job of researching what needs to go into those guides so that we can make sure that we serve our patients well. And I have got a snoring beagle behind me, folks. Hermione decided to wander in here, take a nap, so I apologize if any of that's coming through in the audio. Okay, step 2, this is where you get into your content creation. So once you have that raw information from your research, it's time to spin that into good content and get ready to organize it. Now remember, your mission here it's twofold. Number 1, to present the information that patients need, but also number 2, we need to present it in a way that is helpful and useful. Because if they have a patient guide that is chock full of information that is hard to understand, or that they need to work to understand, they're never going to use it, and it's not going to be delivering any benefits for you. So as we create this content, remember to speak in patients' language. What do they call things? How do they look up information? What terms would be most effective in communicating with them? For example, if I'm a patient and I'm looking for, okay, where do I go to get my lab results? I'm not going to look for diagnostics. Now, that's a term that is very common within the healthcare field, but diagnostics is not going to be the first word on my mind. I'm going to go looking for lab results. So that's just one example of an opportunity to speak to patients in their own language so that you can be as helpful as possible to them. Okay, step 3, organize your content. So you've got your content written, and you probably got it written in little modules that we're going to now combine and organize into a cohesive patient guide. Now, as we go into organization, we need to make sure it's intuitive. We need to make sure that we are creating categories that make sense to the patient, that we're creating a well-organized table of contents and also a well-organized index that is going to make that information so just silly easy to find. And this is where it might make sense to go back to your focus groups, to those patients you talked to in the research phase, and get their input. And I was thinking about one of my corporate jobs where we were doing some user experience research. And one thing we did there was a card sorting exercise. So we created, and I can't remember if we did, I think we found a program to help us do this to do this digitally, but you can also do it by hand. Just write on index cards the various modules, so the titles of the various modules. So it might be, food and drink, it might be making an appointment, and just kind of put them in a pile in front of someone and ask them, okay, how would you organize these topics? And we made it very clear when we did this exercise, there are no right and wrong answers. We want to make sure we understand how people think and how they would expect and react to the organization of these topics. And it was kind of fun, actually, to see the different ways that people organized those content topics. And very often it was very different from how we would have chosen it. So that's just one way to get real input from real patients in terms of how you're going to organize that content for your patient guide. Okay, step 4, we're going to finalize that content. This is where we verify that all the information that we've pulled together and all the content that we've created is complete and accurate. So you want to go back to your various departments, make sure that everything is tip-top, 100% up-to-date, accurate. And this is where you might want to start thinking about different languages. I know in Houston, we have a very large Spanish-speaking population, so the healthcare organizations here in town, many of them offer patient guides in Spanish to better serve that community and to make it more, to make that experience more favorable for folks who come in from that community. So if your healthcare organization serves a culturally diverse community, you might want to start thinking about, when you finalize that content, about putting it into different languages. Okay, so our content is created, it's organized, it's finalized, we've proofed, we have crossed every T and dotted every I. So now we want to create the finished product, and it's time to think about formatting. So this is going to be the technical side of your patient guide, and this is where many organizations slip up. They create a great patient guide. They put everything into a PDF document and slap it up on their website and call it done. Well, think about the patient. So if I am on site at the hospital and need some information out of that guide, I don't have my computer with me. And I can try to open that PDF on my phone, but if it's like most PDF, it's going to be very cumbersome and not a great user experience to manage that. So what you want to do here is talk to your IT folks and talk about the best way to offer this information in the formats that patients need it in. I might have my phone, I might have my iPad. Yeah, I might be at home looking on my computer to prepare for this first appointment or this first, showing up for my surgery or whatever. But, I need it. I need it in a format that is friendly to me. So if I get to the hospital and I forgot something that I learned when I was preparing, or I forgot where that, where to check in for surgeries, et cetera, I need to have that in a format that is friendly to where I am and to that experience. So talk to your IT folks. You might think about a section of your website. You might want to think about a microsite, or you might even, this is crazy, create a mobile app for your patients who are coming in. And think about those ideas. Of course, cost is going to be a factor. And really think about the best way that you can serve your patients. Also, now is the time to think about updates. If an update needs to be made to your patient guide, what's your procedure going to be? And how are you going to ensure that that information stays up to date? Maybe a quarterly review. Once a quarter, have one of your team members just comb through every piece of that patient guide, check back in with departments and make sure that everything is current. Because nothing is more frustrating. I won't say nothing. There are probably things more frustrating, but it is very frustrating to pull up a patient guide that is might be in that PDF format and find out it hasn't been updated since 2012. So you want to think about incorporating those updates into a procedure and make sure that it stays current going forward. Step 6, and finally, we want to create a feedback loop. We want to make it easy for both patients and staff members to make suggestions for improvement. How do they update them, saying, oh, by the way, the gift shop now closes at 6 instead of 5? To have a system for taking in those suggestions, figuring out which ones need to be incorporated and a way for implementing them. So we need to keep working on those patient guides. It's not like, okay, once and done, on to the next thing. Keep working for your patient guide and it will keep working for you. So that is my quick overview of the 6 steps to creating and maintaining an effective patient guide for healthcare organizations. If you have any questions or want to add to the conversation, I would love to hear from you. And the best way to reach me is through the website resonancecontent.com. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. For today's tip, I want to talk about making emotional connections. And a lot of marketers get scared when they hear me talk about emotional connection because in a way, it goes everything we think we know about marketing. You know, we think about marketing as features and benefits, as social proof, its value propositions. And yes, all that is important, but I remember something that I learned in sales training years ago, and that is people make decisions based on emotion. And they only justify those decisions with facts. And healthcare is a great example. You know, so many healthcare websites just inundate the visitors with credentials of their doctors and awards they won and groundbreaking research they're involved in. And that's all very important. But when a patient is looking into or when a person is looking into becoming a patient and they're doing their research, they really want to know one thing. Do you care about me? Now, how do we impart that? Well, the way we don't do that, we don't say we care about you because, you know, I always feel like if you have to say it, then it's automatically suspect. You know, the old, we're here from the government, we're here to help kind of thing. So, you know, it's not by telling them you care about it. It's by showing them. It's by making that content friendly and approachable. It's about sharing information that is useful to them. It's about sharing stories of real, relatable people whom you were able to help. It's about letting them meet some of the people on your staff and start making a connection with those folks. Give them everything they need to feel totally comfortable making their decision to become a patient with your organization. If you speak to your audience's emotional needs, you will do more than make a sale or gain a patient. You will earn a fan for life. Okay, campers, that's it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this, another unplugged version of the podcast. Again, next week we will be back in full form. If you like what you've heard today, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play Music or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. I would so appreciate it. Also, remember to sign up for our Tip of the Week emails at resonancetips.com. As you know, I always like to leave you with a quote, and today's comes from Henry Ford. He once said, quote, "Failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently," unquote. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.